Today I'm going to be taking a look at this 2U case, which obviously I like so much I bought two of, and go over a couple builds that I've done in them, one being a router and one being a dedicated video capture PC. And I'm just going to go over the case a bit and maybe why you want a nice little 2U case on a rack and instead of a 1U. I already did a video talking about why I don't particularly like 1U cases, and although I tried to put my router into that, I just cannot deal with them. This particular case, the KRI CK2380F, which is also sold under the name IPC2360F, and probably others by other manufacturers, they all seem to be the exact same case, is one of the few front I/O 2U cases. Now, companies like Sliger and a million others make really nice 2U cases. The problem is finding them where they have the I/O on the front, which in my case is not absolutely required, but it was definitely something that I wanted. The advantage to this is that I have my network patch panel. I'll be able to patch into it and run HDMI and stuff through Keystone jacks and have access to all of this stuff. Like, I might need to plug in something or whatever, and it's just convenient. In terms of I/O, there's a simple power reset and status LEDs, and you get two USB Type A ports, USB 3.0 Type A ports, and there's even a little cutout for a panel mount connector, which this will fit quite a few different connectors, like a serial connector, that sort of thing. I'm actually using it for HDMI on this one, but we'll get into that as I look at the specific builds. Moving along, we have standard I/O shields, which you do not get with 1U cases. They do not have the height to have a standard I/O shield, so they chop it off. It has 4 low-profile PCI Express slot covers because it accepts both ITX and mini ITX boards, not ATX though. Around back, it takes 2 80mm fans. Unlike a lot of 2U cases, these will accept a ATX power supply. So you can put a full-size desktop power supply in these as long as you don't stack them like this. If you do this, you'll kill the power supply because the air intake comes through the top and it'll just kill the power supply. So whatever you do, do not put an ATX power supply in if you're stacking it like this. If you have open space above it, like you have patch panels, no problem. In this particular setup, for both of them actually, I happen to have flex ATX power supplies that were good enough and quiet. Normally I stay away from them. They're commonly used in 1U cases. One of the reasons why I hate 1U cases is because they have to use flex ATX power supplies that are often loud, but these two happen to be fine, so I'm going to use them. I've adapted them first from ATX down to SFX, and then from SFX I 3D printed a little mounting bracket. There's also Ethernet on the back that is coupled in, so you can have an internal port that you just couple to the back of this. I'm not using it in this setup, but it's there. Can't comment on the rails for these. I didn't buy any. I don't really think I need rails for these computers just because they're not something I'd be opening up a lot. Even if I did open them up, because they're front I/O, you have to disconnect everything to pull them out. And often, you know, like the reason why I want like rails other than like the weight of like a big hard drive NAS is just so I can get into stuff while it's running. These ones, since they're front I/O, you'd have to disconnect everything before doing that, so kind of defeats the purpose for me. So I didn't bother getting rails. Plus they're small, so it's, you know, it's not a big deal to move them around. Taking a look at the router build first, because I think this is more in line with what most people would be building in a rack mount case. It's a pretty simple build with just a motherboard. There's no external storage or anything like that. There's the Flex ATX power supply. I just 3D printed a little kind of stand for it just to give it a little more stability. You don't really need it. It'll stay on with the screws at the back. I've got a Gigabyte Q670M D3H motherboard in here, which is a bit of an unusual board. It's a Q series and it supports vPro, so you can use their own Intel's proprietary remote management software on this to basically function as like IPMI and remotely control a PC. I don't need that. I have a Pi KVM hooked up to a 4-way switch, so I can just control this normally with that. It's a nice feature to have. This particular board I chose because it had two M.2 slots and it had the PCI Express slots that I wanted, like of the right physical length. It basically came out that this was the only option when I was looking for boards. You know, you can use really any board you want. This particular one just happened to meet kind of the specific needs that I wanted. It also had two Ethernet ports that at the time I really wanted. I've kind of changed how I'm going to do my setup, so I don't think I'll need all the ports, but it's good that they're there. I've also got a PCI Express card adding two more 2.5 gig ports. On the motherboard, it's a 1 gig and 2.5 gig. I wish they were both 2.5 gig, but they're not. But I can use the 1 gig for the WAN connection until I switch over to 2 gigabit fiber for my home connection. These are all based on the Intel chipsets. Unfortunately, this is an older Intel 225 controller, which had a lot of problems, so we'll see how reliable this is. I might have to just use it for something that's 1 gig. This card uses the newer Intel 226 Mark V, which is the most reliable version of it. However, from what I've read, they're still unreliable. I personally have not run into any issues. My current router is a Topton small form factor router motherboard computer thing, and it has many of them on it, and I have not run into any issues, all with most of them running at 2.5 gig. It seems to be kind of random. With 2.5 gig Ethernet, if you're looking into it, honestly, either Realtek or Intel seem to be just as bad. So it kind of just doesn't matter at this point, I don't think, with 2.5 gig, if you're looking for 2.5 gig. Because even though, you know, everyone goes, oh, the drivers for Realtek are terrible. Yeah, well, the Intel chips are unstable, so we'll take your pick. This motherboard takes DDR5. I've got 32 gigs of DDR5 in here, just some standard crucial memory, and an Intel 13500T CPU, which is a low power version of a 13500. If you're looking for a processor specifically for the Q670 series, make sure you get the 500 or higher if you want to use the remote management. If you get something lower than this, the vPro will not function without a 500 or higher. So just keep that in mind. Again, if you're not using it, doesn't matter. I'm using a 2U vapor chamber cooler from Cooler Guys. I've stuck a Noctua fan on it. I'm not 100% sure if it's going to be enough. The fan that it ships with is very powerful and very loud, but I'm trying to avoid too much noise since this is a router. It's going to be on 24/7. If I have to switch it to the other fan and just limited speed to something a bit more powerful than this, maybe, but I doubt it. It should be okay. The 80mm fans that come with the case are actually pretty decent. They do not move a lot of air, neither do these Noctuas, to be honest, but they're a bit quieter and nicer and more reliable. Basically, once I'm done shooting this video, I'm going to just pop the SSDs into this and go from there. I'm running Proxmox on my router currently, and it's running a couple VMs, OpenSense and Home Assistant right now. I might migrate more to this system as a VM system and possibly switch my TrueNAS system back to being just TrueNAS. Right now it's also running Proxmox and it has a couple different VMs on it, but we'll see. I might change it up and simplify things to just have one Proxmox system. But overall, very easy to build in. It will take two 3.5-inch drives. They don't get any airflow in their configuration, so I might like just kind of screw in a fan somewhere here just to get some airflow. It also takes 2.5-inch drives. However, with the 2.5-inch drives, they only put screw mounts for 2 of them. Why didn't they just put one every few millimeters so you can put like 10 of them in here? I don't know. It seems like a waste. You can make this into a really nice all flash NAS if you wanted to. You still can, you know, you can mod it and just stick SSDs anywhere really. So it's possible. It would be nice if they had just drilled enough holes for you to install as many SSDs as you want. These particular cases don't come with power supplies, so you have to bring your own. Like I said, lots of variants in what you can use, all the way down to Flex ATX like I'm using, or up to full-size ATX as long as you're not blocking the top. Looking at the Capture PC, which I think is a much more unusual style of build, but this kind of just shows off how versatile a 2U case is, as long as you can get low profile versions of whatever cards you need. Again, I'm using a Flex ATX power supply. This one's a bit more powerful. It's 310 watts. The other one was 150, but that isn't pulling like at most like 90 watts of power. I'm using the same cooler, although I do have a weaker CPU. I think this is a 12400 or maybe a 12600. I can't remember. I basically just need a system with Intel QuickSync. It meets the requirements. Again, I've swapped out the fan, the rear fans. However, because this is a lot more packed in this case, with testing, I may need to swap them out for beefier fans and just live with noise. Since this system isn't on 24/7, it's not a huge deal. This system has one goal, which is to be able to record video from two sources. I want HDMI in for my camera that I'm using now to film myself if I need to. And I have a 4K 60 capture card here that I will use for screen capture. So that's my setup. And I have 10 gig Ethernet and a video card, although this is kind of optional with QuickSync, and I don't know if I'll keep this or replace it with a beefier one in the future. Kind of have a dream of being able to edit video with DaVinci Resolve on this, so I might put a bigger video card in here one day. But in the meantime, this is just a half-dead NVIDIA 1050 Ti. This 10 gig card is kind of interesting because it's not actually in a slot. It's just taking up one of the spaces. It's not actually plugged into the motherboard. You can see there's a cable running down here to an M.2 slot. That way I had enough PCI Express lanes because Intel desktop boards and AMD don't have enough PCI Express lanes for these kind of weird scenarios where you need 4x for capture card, 4x for a NIC, and then you want a GPU as well. So it gets a little difficult. I've given up one of the two M.2 slots for a converter that lets me plug in this NIC, which is an older X520, which they're not super efficient, but it gets 10 gig and it's good enough. The system's not on all the time. It doesn't matter how efficient it is. I've wedged in a little Noctua fan, 40 millimeter, just to get some air circulation here because it's kind of closed off. This motherboard is an Asus TUF Gaming B760M plus Wi-Fi 6 D4 from my previous capture PC. I've got a couple sticks of RAM in here. They're I think they're 16 gig sticks or 8 gig sticks. I don't need a ton of RAM on this. It's just enough to run OBS. At the time, this motherboard wasn't super expensive, and I think it's still decently priced. I mean, it does use DDR4, which I don't want to invest in at this point, but since I have some DDR4, I don't see any reason to change all of it out yet. It does have 2.5 gig networking on board, which is nice, and integrated IO shield and stuff like that. So it's a nice board if you have DDR4. I wouldn't recommend it if you don't. One unusual thing I've done with this setup is I have a USB-C motherboard header here, and I've converted that into a normal USB 3.0 type A port, and then I have an extension running off that internally to this Elgato Camlink 4K, which only does 4K 30, which means I don't really want to use it for screen capture. So what I'll be using this for is probably 1080 60 capture from my camera to do a little picture-in-picture as opposed to doing 4K on it, because 30 frames, no good. No good these days. That runs to an internal panel mount HDMI connector, which comes out here at the back of the case. So you can just plug in an HDMI cable here to get your 4K 30, and then you can plug in an HDMI cable on this end to get your 4K 60, and they'll record at the same time. Motherboard has your standard array of ports, lots of USB, all that kind of stuff. The front I/O means I can plug in stuff if I need to. Overall, I don't really have any complaints about the cases. Two kind of unusual builds in it, although we'll see about the cooling in this one. I might need to go back to higher speed fans, but that's just the territory with rack mount stuff. I'll get this rack mounted finally. I've had these on my desk for a long time, and I'd really like to get them in service as opposed to taking up space on my desk. Okay, so full disclosure, I filmed this video a long time ago, a couple months ago by now, and I've already pulled the capture PC out and put it into a 4U case. I've already ordered another 4U case for my router build. Now, to be clear, these cases are good. The 2U cases, I do like them, and I would keep them if not for the fact that now I actually have a lot more space in my rack. I can use a bigger case. My kind of design goals for the capture PC have changed. Now it's more of an editing station, and I want to be able to put a GPU into my case for my VM machine because I want to at least experiment at the time for replacing local, and I'd like to replace some cloud stuff like Amazon Echo with something local, which needs a GPU for AI stuff kind of need a bigger case. Just to be clear, I don't have a problem with these cases. They're really good. Even though when I finished building it, the whole front I/O thing, I didn't like it in my setup. It was just like an aesthetic thing. There's nothing wrong with it. It's really convenient to use. Aesthetically, looking at my rack, it just bothered me. What are you going to do? I made a mistake. I didn't need these cases. I don't want you to see a video in the future where I'm rebuilding both of these systems into something else and think that I don't like these cases. They are good cases. They're well made. I just didn't like them in my setup.
No, I think someone else is. Today, people might get mad. People are happy. They get to fix this.